This is The Extensionists, Conversations with Great Thinkers in Agriculture. I'm Tobin Dick.
And I'm Jay Wetter.
Hey, Jay.
Hey, Tobin. How you doing?
Good. So today, today I'm not going to be I don't need to be the token farmer.
Right. We have a farmer as a guest today.
We do have a farmer as a guest today. I think that's great.
Well, it's good for us as in the world of extension to check in with farmers on messages that resonate and how they run their operations and pull some little tidbits from that side of the world. I mean, that's our audience, but at the same time, it's good to check in and see some of their business approaches and their communications tactics.
It is interesting. Like you think of all the farmers throughout Canada, North America, world, whatever, and each of them kind of being their own. They are their own companies, right? They're their own corporations now, and like it's interesting. So it's I really like I draw value from learning how other farms work, and especially when they're when they and I'm sure this guest will be very, very similar. Like they impart some insights, some new things, and it's always inspiring. I was like, oh, I should do that in my operation. That would really take things up a notch.
Yeah, so hopefully there's 2 or 3 tidbits of the conversation that people can take home and apply to their farm operations or even just their organizational operations. Because like you said, Tobin, these are all businesses or they're run with a business mentality, and there's a lot of crossover tips. Hey, one other thing we might talk about with John is hiking. Do you hike? Does that laugh mean yes or no?
Laugh means like Jay knew to ask me that question. It's like,
yeah.
Are you passionate about hiking? I do like hiking. I do like hiking. There was one hike in Manitoba that Jamie and I did last summer or summer before. It's I forget what it's called right off the top of my head right now, but it's kind of billed as the preparatory hike for the Manitoba Trail.
Okay.
So it's by West Hog Lake. Oh, what was it called? Anyway, it caught us off guard. It was quite insane.
Oh, really? Like challenging?
It was challenging.
Some elevation changes. Well, you're in Winkler, which there isn't even a hill, let alone, well, I shouldn't say, there's not even a 1-foot rise on your farm, let alone a hill.
So we don't know. We sense the air density changes. We're very sensitive to it.
When you sit on the tailgate of your truck, you get dizzy.
Right. Yeah. That Canadian Shield is just so high. I just can't. Yeah.
Anyway, so have you done the Manitoba Trail?
No, but I'd like to.
Yeah, I haven't either. Maybe that's an extensionist weekend.
Oh my gosh, we should do it. I think it's a significant trail.
Yeah, 60K or something.
I know a lot of people who've done it many times. Colleague of ours, I don't know if we're naming names, so we're not going to name his name, but is a runner, trail runner. I think he ran it.
Oh, okay.
He was with a group of people who ran it. That would be quite something.
I wouldn't do that, but I would definitely hike it for sure.
Yeah, I'd definitely sprain my ankle if I ran it. Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Or just not be able to finish.
Should we get on with the conversation?
Yeah, we should.
But before we start today's interview, we want to thank our episode sponsor, Sask Oilseeds.
Sask Oilseeds texting service delivers agronomy resources, event notices, and urgent news right to your phone. Have questions? You can also initiate a two-way conversation with the Sask Oilseeds team. Visit saskcanola.com/texting for details on how to subscribe.
All right, welcome to The Extensionists. I'm Jay, this is Tobin, and our guest today is John Burns. And John is a farmer from Kandahar, Saskatchewan. He and his family run Windy Poplars Farm. Many trees, one farm. That's what John just told me a few minutes ago. So welcome, John. We're going to talk about all kinds of things from chemistry and teaching to farming and branding. But first of all, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. We're in such a fantastic industry, and we've got such a diversity of backgrounds and people, and I think that should be our strength, and not use it, and not a challenge.
Right, exactly. And it's, I mean, getting any farmer to agree is always a challenge, but we all have similar objectives in mind. Yeah. Hmm. John, I want to ask you about your hometown. So I grew up in Dand, Manitoba, which is basically just a dot on a map with nothing much left there except a few hardy souls. But Kandahar, interesting name. That's your hometown, but not a lot going on there anymore. But it's still meaningful for you. What does Kandahar mean to you?
Well, it's unique. It's historically it was renowned as being there being a restaurant there called Sam's Place, and even John Diefenbaker had dropped in there, and people you talk about Kandahar. Oh, is that steakhouse still there? But no, it's now if you're driving on the highway, if you blink, you've missed it. But yeah, that's rural towns have sort of eroded to a large degree, and especially those that don't have a industry that has been prompted by some entrepreneur. But so Wynyard is actually our closest post office box location, and we're on the south shores, and I say of the bigger Quill Lakes.
Right.
Notoriously water issues.
Okay, John, I got to ask you. So I'm looking at you right now, and I can see in your sweater. I see three. It looks like the periodic table of elements there. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, so this is essentially the essence of where I come from. In fact, as I grew up on a farm, close to actually where we farm right now, and but my wife didn't marry a farmer. And I was literally kicked off the farm as I was finishing my high school education. I did well enough in school, but I had 6 other siblings. My dad said, "No, you can take care of yourself," and so and I enjoyed academics. So I essentially, when I started university, I was thinking of mathematics, and because I liked doing mathematics, but as is I guess a university education, it teaches you to get out there and find out what your passion is. And I went from math to physics, and then I landed on chemistry, because things happen, and you find there's building blocks that explain the world, and so essentially that's what chemistry is. I guess is meant for in my lifetime. I enjoy teaching. I taught university classes for off-campus classes in Saskatchewan for 25 years, as well as picking up firstly a hobby and then a bad habit, and eventually it turned into an enterprise, which we've reaped some rewards, because essentially that has allowed us to have 13 of our 16 grandchildren grow up within 4.5 miles of where we live, and it doesn't get much better than that.
Oh, wow.
John, you said your wife didn't marry a farmer. So what did she marry? A teacher or a chemist, or what were you?
Well, I was still in university. I just started my doctoral degree, and the idea wasn't that in the mid '60s, farming wasn't necessarily a profession, is what you deferred to, and so I think the thought was if you could make it somewhere else, not necessarily New York, and you'd survive. It would give you some choices, and that's actually what I would advocate is education is probably the most important. It tells you, it molds you, it tells you who you are, gives you confidence, gives you choices.
And do you think when your dad kicked you off the farm, or whatever phrase that was he used, what did that? I mean, you ultimately came back to farming, but I think you've incorporated that into your own family philosophy, where actually leaving the farm is an essential step in growing as a farmer. And was that from your own experience that where the reason you made that a farm philosophy, and what's the point of that?
Yes, because then farming is a choice, and then you're committed to it. Farming is an enterprise that requires commitment. And if you're always thinking, well, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, or there's other opportunities that you've missed, well, you've made that decision and you've had that opportunity. And the other, I'd say, critical opportunity of having exposure to what's out there, so to speak, what's in the bigger world, is the networking. I mean, just knowing that you can approach others to help solve your problems, or I would say your problems. They're never problems. They're challenges. They're things that you need to overcome. So I think that is critical. I think, to at least the way I feel an approach to farming is to use all the resources and to make sure it's the decision you've made, and get committed, get in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that. Like my parents were the same way when I thought about farming as a young child. They definitely, the requirement was that it had to be a passion of mine, because if I wasn't interested in it. So John, I'm a farmer from southern Manitoba. So you were talking to us on our at our farm at my farm studio. That I shouldn't do it if I'm not passionate about it, because it's just not going to work otherwise. And so that was always drilled into me as well. Yeah. So just going back to your sweater. So just for the people who are going to watch us on YouTube and just going from it. So what's on it is an F, and then a capital AR, and then a capital M, lowercase n, all in 3 different blocks. So what do those mean?
Well, of course, those are part of the periodic table. So that's fluorine, argon, and manganese. But
so it's farming.
Farming is science.
I love it. Did you get that sweater made, or did you find it somewhere?
Actually, it was my son who actually found it on somewhere in the web, and it was a gift. But of course, I'm always alerting to the periodic table and helping you how it understands, how we can understand our world. And I don't say preach or suggest, think small, but then plan big.
I want to talk about your chemistry background and how that influences some of the decisions you make on the farm. Obviously, not all farmers have a chemistry background. How does that play into, say, nutrient management decisions or soil health decisions or anything else you decide?
It's actually that's part of the passion for me, is that to help to understand and essentially I use the scientific method, where you look at what the issue may be. I'll say alluded to the problem, the challenge may be. Look at the resources, and of course, soil is right up there at the top of our resources. People are very close, but soil is critical. So that's sort of the starting point of, I guess, what we'll call the ability to have a legacy and to do the best we can so that we have a future in agriculture. So we're leaving the land, the industry in better shape than when we arrived. And I always find that working with living organisms, even though many we can't see, and I guess that's where chemistry comes in. We can't see those atoms, but they're pretty important. And so same in the soil. There's microorganisms. So, and trying to understand what it takes to make a healthy soil, a living soil, because then it gives back.
So, John, what you've explained to me is what I could hear from any farmer. So can you dig in a little on the chemistry side? Like what is going on there that you might know about that the average farmer or anyone else in agriculture might not? And how do we use that information?
So ultimately, we'll look at what might be something that we could change. Again, understanding living organisms and they need to be fed, and tweaking something we do. And one of the big ones that is undeniable is the zero tillage, direct seeding. Just the impact that had, and now with having the some of the technology to actually do more monitoring of changes if we do even small changes. So ultimately, it's finding what we can do and what we think is the best opportunity at our farm to get an improved, response from either its tenure, how we do the agronomy, or have the mechanics to improve it, and then to log it, record it. So it's that
Right.
it's that scientific method where you go through the 5 steps, and then you go back and start all over again. So you're never done. Nothing is so good that it can't be improved. But you have to identify. For me, it's imperative to understand on my farm what that step is, and not to bring in too many variables. Farming has so many variables, and so to be able to manage those variables probably would be a forte that I would say we have had on our farm.
What are the 5 steps of the scientific method?
So the scientific method that I like to follow, and I think it's pretty universal, is that first of all you identify a problem or a challenge, or and it may not be a problem that is even a threatening problem. It's just an opportunity. And then you look at the resources, what you have around you that helps and you to address that problem. It could be people, because they all have knowledge, and we don't want to always reinvent the wheel. Our soil is critical when we're talking about agriculture. So those are a couple of the top priorities. Then there's the method. How are we going to go about planning? And of course follow through, and then comes the observations, making sure you've dedicated enough time and resources to have a follow through to do the correct analysis, and then a conclusion. So what did we see? And in the conclusion, it can be something that answers the problem you had, or the challenge, or it's still a conclusion. Even if it doesn't, you look at the questions you have in that conclusion to then start the process all over again. So it's not linear; it's cyclical.
Can you walk me through an example of a decision you made on the farm that was driven by some of the scientific method experimentation that you had done?
So I guess the background here. So I farmed as a kid. There was a lot of tillage going on, and we had a lot of black snow. When I came back to farming, and I mean that's a story in itself, I said, that's not good enough. What can we do to minimize erosion? People had tried trees, etc., but in doing some research, we were starting to get some tools, some chemicals, and one of those was glyphosate, that allows us to control weeds and keep some cover on the land. And in our area, it was critical because we have a very sloped land from in about a 12-mile range. We have an 800-foot elevation change, so you can imagine the water erosion that can happen, and as well as the wind erosion. So that was the first thing I focused on, and attended a lot of meetings and read a lot of articles, and so started using some chemical control of weeds, and did much less tillage. We didn't have the next step then, of course, was then how do we seed? What are the tools? So but the very first one was the focus, was not to till.
Mm-hmm. So you talked a little bit about like if there's more to that previous story, for sure, continue. You talked a little bit about data over time and how your farm records data and how important that is for the development of your farm, which I agree with, and I think that's really interesting. What I've struggled with, and just a selfish question, is how do you keep that data? Is it software? Like, how do you over time? And is there you've likely developed some good workflows in your farm system, and I'd love to chat a little bit about what's worked for you.
Well, initially it was one of the main reasons to be part of crop insurance, and even on the early stages of crop insurance, you could be part of a program where you actually identified all your inputs, and of course you record the yields. So that's tabulated in a very methodical method. So that was the initial stage. 6 years ago, we've gone more to a higher level using climate field view, where my son could tell you what we did on what day and what chemical we used and what the weather was like. So we've got a better ability to do benchmarking, to manage the variables and know what, if something isn't consistent, let's look at more of the variables that may have had a factor. And part of that then, though, we have to address those things that are most important to us in the variability factors.
So some of those programs have kind of one of the barriers to entry is just how much effort it takes to kind of input all your farm data and get going on these things like Climate Field View, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. And I've been resistant to it just because there's that onboarding process can seem a bit daunting at times. Would you say that it's been worth it to have that kind of centralized platform?
Yes, partly because I was doing it in my head before that. That becomes more of a challenge. Trying to record what we did, what happened during the year. But I feel very fortunate in our operation. We have 3 engineers. We have a city planner. We have people who gravitate to that technology, and so it makes my life fun.
Is a lot of it app driven? Like, are you doing it on your smartphone throughout the day? Is that kind of how it looks?
Mostly spreadsheets, and and just information challenging. And of course, people say, "What do you do in the wintertime?" We plan, and if you plan, then the summer's fun, because then you've addressed the questions. You've got a plan A, a plan B, and ultimately you're ready, because we have a very short season.
Describe for me that planning process. I don't want to leave that because that I think is essential with a lot of farm management is taking the time in the winter to make a plan for the following year. What's your process?
Okay.
Oh wow! Okay.
So what we're looking at, listeners, is a fairly beautiful, actually, infographic, or I don't even know what you would say, but the chart.
Yeah. So walk us through that.
Okay. So as we're harvesting, we're already deciding what's going to go in that next year, because you have to worry about residuals, how we're going to do the fall management. So actually, crop planning and rotation happens several years before we actually put the crop in the ground. Partly the marketing. We will have marketed some of our crops even as much as 2 to 3 years in advance of actually seeding it. Just we'll address why we do that another time, perhaps. But so in October it actually starts, and so and that's I'll bring in something here that helps us, and I alluded to that. We are a team. To be able to do all this single-handedly would be very onerous and not nearly as much fun. And with being a team, we use the strengths, and so it helps in the planning, and it allows us to bounce things off each other. Because there's again a lot of factors that come into play, and you want to minimize being blindsided. And of course, that's one reason we plan, because then we've got, if something changes, there's no panic. We've got so even just the process of doing that is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Like
yeah, I believe that,
because then we've addressed what ifs. And so canola drops $2. Well, we lost $2. No, we didn't, because we didn't sell any. You manage those. So it's just that mental, I guess, mitigation of stress, or and stress. All stress isn't bad, but it needs to be controlled stress. So that's why we plan, and it works really well for us, because then we have our, like right now, we have all our inputs in place. We have the machinery's set up. We do our machinery assessments before the end of the year. What do we need? What do we need to repair? So and then we have a shop. So, and we actually have 8 full-time employees. So that also keeps us on track too. So it's not a challenge. It makes us aware that there's things to be done, and we need to use all our resources.
I don't want to leave this planning thing. Hopefully you're okay with that, Tobin, for a bit. But
no, for sure.
I just think this process, and then so you've got these spreadsheets of information. You've got your 2 to 3 year planning ahead, which I do want to get to, because I'm really curious about what crops you're marketing 2 to 3 years ahead. So
how could that look?
I just want to park that for a sec. But so do you set aside a weekend where everybody, all of your 8 staff and your family get together? And so who do you sit around a table with an agenda, and who's there? Just describe for me how the actual planning event looks like.
Okay, I don't know if you were on the website, but we have a boardroom, and we have what are called Monday morning meetings, and that's Monday morning management meetings. So most Monday mornings, other than if we're very actively farming, we still do have phones and we can communicate. But we make the best effort to have a Monday morning management meeting. And actually, prior to that management meeting, there will have been a all employer meeting for the week. That's at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning. There'd be a farm planning meeting. At 9 o'clock, from 9 till noon, there'd be a management meeting. So all those that are in the management team, which include there are 5 of us on that board, and so we will go through things that have come up and we address them, and we would have an agenda, and there would be items that need to be on that agenda. So we try and be organized. So that's the operation. And then in non-farming season, on Thursday, we will have a day where we will bring up specific items that we don't want to do in management. That's our agronomy, meeting with either the banker or inputs people or etc. So that's in, I'll say, the off season. That's the format. And we also have part of the bigger picture is we have family meetings, because this is a family farm, and we have 4 of those a year that include, so 2 of our children are part of our farming children, are part of the farming enterprise, 2 are not, but all are part of the farm family. So opportunities. In fact, we have 2 return to farm members now, and they are from one of the non-farming families. They have worked on the farm, with the farm. They've both got degrees in agriculture, and they have worked off the farm for 3 years already, and they're moving back. They're coming back to be part of the farm operation, but they're from one of the non-farming families. So,
and why do you have the non-farming family members part of those quarterly meetings? Why is that important?
Because this is a family farm, and and we want to all of our grandchildren, Linda's our grandchildren, and on down the line, to have the opportunity to work in agriculture, which is the best and most rewarding industry there is.
So it's just to make sure everyone knows that there's an opportunity there. So the two siblings who are not farmers themselves, they're there with your objective that maybe their kids, your grandkids, you want to make sure that they have that opportunity, even though their parents might not have been interested or found opportunities elsewhere. That's really interesting.
Or and this is a question to everybody here, or is it because I get it, or is it an awareness thing where there is a sense that even the family members who aren't involved in the farm, because it's a family farm, are deserving of just knowing how this operation is going, whether or not they're a part of it. They're just they're brought into that conversation. Is there also value in that, and not contingent on them, like that's necessarily coming back to the farm, but it's just, hey, you're a part of this because you are a part of the family. We want to just keep you in the loop.
Yes, and yes. So even to go beyond, succession is critical to a farm legacy. So that necessitates that all of our children, or we hope that they're still friends after we're gone. That they understand what it takes, and to avoid entitlement, because much as it wasn't our plan to acquire some valued assets, it happens, and it's to put it into perspective what those mean. And I keep at not every meeting, but most meetings, I say, and land is not a commodity.
Right. Well, this is really interesting. Yeah, land is not a commodity.
Because in different people's eyes, depending on their background, it has different values and different importance.
Right. Yeah, that's very it's very interesting.
Extension, we often think of it as, livestock husbandry or crop management, but succession and human resources and family are obviously critical elements of a successful farm. Where did this meeting structure, this planning structure come from? Is that from your own head and your own experience, John, or did you get some outside help in creating these structures?
Well, I'd have to say that the bud is probably in my head, but again, the only way to I guess do due diligence is to use all the resources that you have, and I'll have to say for many years till we knew that our children were absolutely committed to farming, we didn't formalize a lot of that transition. In fact, up till that time, there wasn't the land. We could have been, accused of child brutality if we'd passed on the farmer and insisted that they come to the farm. But all of a sudden, things have changed since about 2000. And so now we really saw the insight to be more proactive in, I guess, understanding, the value, the opportunity, and where every family member fits into that. So, because questions lead to fear, lead to misunderstandings. So we felt it was important to I guess nip that in the bud. So we've probably been transitioning, and the transition isn't just the assets. It's the mentoring. It's the operation. It's the philosophy. we do scholarships. We value education. Anybody who wants to undertake a course or learning program, whether it's a university one or one that's available, we help promote and assist that. So we commit dollars to that.
You do scholarships within your own family, or is this out for the community?
In community as well, but the ones we do in the community are more for citizenship. Where they are part of the community and the community structure. I'll say for one thing, I'll give one example of a young girl who's in the 4-H, and she raises a steer, and the profits that go from that steer go to the land bank.
Interesting. How would you say that your dad kicking you off the farm? Would you say that has inspired you to ensure your family has a place at your farm?
I just have to go back. I said land bank, the food bank. Sorry, I meant the food bank, not the land bank.
Yeah,
the food bank.
The land bank.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
I've got too much history.
Yeah.
So, I guess the reason I came back, or my wife and I came back to the farm, is I had my doctoral degree, and I was doing a postdoc in Kingston, Ontario, at the time, and had an opportunity to work for the Department of National Defense or other chemical companies in Central Canada. Can't call them Eastern Canada, Central Canada. But I guess a part of the reason we came back is my mother passed away or was quite sick early on in my essentially from age 13 on. I saw very little of her, and when I was 16, she passed away. My grandfather raised us essentially, and he was starting to have health issues, so we decided to move back to Saskatchewan. The challenging part was the opportunities in 1975 to come back to Saskatchewan. I took a high school employment opportunity for a year, and then I worked for the regional college. Some doing GED and some doing organizing programs, and then the next year I was offered the opportunity to teach off-campus university chemistry classes at Munster. The year after that, there was also opportunities at Parkland at Yorkton. And then I would do night classes at Melfort. So I was teaching university classes at 3 different locations, and at that time farmers were struggling, and we just picked up a bit of land here or there because we could, and it was close. And so I say a hobby turned into, I guess, a bad habit after a while. But by the time 2000 came around, I couldn't do both, and we were sort of at 7,000 acres, and that was kind of a struggle. So I deferred from teaching actively at university, but I think still teaching. But in all that time, the name of your program is, I guess, very appropriate or important to me. That the extension work, the ability to bring together the knowledge, to pass it on in a user-friendly method to the farming community. And when I say the farming community, that also involves processors, and actually to some degree should involve consumers, to understand how we can use this valuable resource, an important resource, and the stable part of Saskatchewan. So I attended as many programs, extensions. I was on the ad board system for 25 years, and those opportunities were remarkable.
So in your world, in your experience with agricultural extension, your vast experience, what methods have you found have worked really well? I mean, you come at this from a very kind of deep science perspective, where you have that ability. How have you been able to extend some of the more kind of complex things to an audience that may not know as much, may not have their PhDs.
Well, the only thing a PhD does is it offers you the ability to network probably more fully and to, I guess, talk to people who are in research from a perspective of practicality as well. So I guess that was an opportunity, I think, for me. So one of the key things that I think that extension can do is offer support for on-farm trials, like early on, so that, and I mean, it means commitment. It's sometimes awkward. Will they always be successful? No, but in the long term, it's worth. It's a sort of short-term pain, long-term gain when you do on-farm trials, and so again, farming has more questions than answers, more variables. So it helps to narrow, being part of access to extension opportunities. It helps to verbalize or helps make a plan so that, and once you have a plan, well, then it's easy to follow through. It's confusion if you don't have the opportunity to talk to people who have dabbled, have committed, and I'll refer to one fellow in particular that unfortunately he's passed away, was Guy Lafond. I had a very close relationship with Guy at the Indian Head Research Station, but he was a phenomenal person, had phenomenal passion, and Saskatchewan, well, agriculture in Western Canada was a debt of gratitude.
Wow, very interesting.
You've mentioned the network a couple of times. You're in networking. Who is in your network? Who are essential people to have in a network?
So on our farm, and we kind of show it on our website, is that we partner with collaborative organizations, people. We work with the machinery, equipment suppliers. One of our most important and critical challenges on the farm is residue management. So we work with Redikoff, and we test their and pilot some of their equipment, their choppers. And we were my son worked for initially Flexicoil, then CNH and so he's got connections there. We test, in fact, we test some of their equipment. They do trials, so seeding equipment. We've been to some think tank activities, and more the engineers more than myself these days, where the individual companies are looking to what's going to happen in the future, what do they need to, what types of equipment, and MacDon was one we worked with for 30 years, the swathers. We work with marketing people, and we work with Cargill and their Market Sense program. We were one of the initial pilot people. I'm trying to think how long ago, but again, it was probably 25 years ago. So again, the management end. So all the aspects that it takes, and we could go into the financing, but that might. I don't want to get into too many details of that, because there are some financial institutions that really do not understand farming.
Just on the marketing, because I'd hoped to come back to this, so the timing is perfect. So you said you market some crops 2 to 3 years in advance. How does that work?
Well, you can actually on the stock exchange, you can actually market wheat and canola 2 years in advance. It'll be a very thin trade, and it'll be limited as to what you can do, but you can actually market, and we have sometimes got as much as 10 to 20% of our grain marketed even before a complete year. But we start now for 2027. So we're down in there. The other collaborative relationships we have is with things with ingredients. I want to suggest we grow ingredients and not commodities. So we grow flax. So ultimately, it's a relationship program that we deal with because it's high omega-3 yellow flax, and there's a limited market. But the schooler requires a commitment, not just 1 year but several years, so that because they need to be in the marketing business for 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years down the road, right? So we have, I won't say handshake agreements, but sort of commitments to each other where there's good follow through that we will grow for them, and we generally our premium is sufficient to be significant, and so some of those we will guarantee not just production, but there'll be a price tag to it because in that production commitment there will be a fixed price.
That's great. We're almost out of time, so I want to sneak a couple things in here. One of them is your love of hiking, and I think that's really interesting. And I think in your interview with Ashley ahead of this, you talked about how you really enjoy hiking and that you treat these annual hiking trips as almost spring training, ahead of the growing season. So I want to talk about the hiking because I enjoy hiking as well. But I also really love the idea of the idea of having a trip like that or a season like that where you are prepping your mind and your body for a busy growing season. And I think that's a neat thing. I think it's a kind of a unique element to an annual kind of farmer's schedule where you take that time, because I know winters can be busy, like for me and Jay and maybe you too. It's lots of farm meetings and stuff like that. So there is that period of time when the conferences end and there's a bit of a kind of a lull between that and when the growing season kicks off. And I love the idea of doing something like that. You get the fresh air, you're outside, you get to enjoy nature and your physical exercise. So yeah, talk a little bit about that. I think it's great.
So a rough rule of thumb is sort of mid-February till the end of 3 weeks. My wife's birthday is on February 17th, and she says she wants to be hiking in the desert in shorts on February 17th. So we don't go to the beach. We have hiked the Grand Canyon 7 times and camped at the bottom. The first 4, we packed everything down and back up, with staying down there either 2 or 3 nights. The last couple of times we've sort of shared some of our load with the mules, because you can. So we're not taking because it's. And so in preparing, and I'm using the Grand Canyon hike as an example. So the elevation at the top of the Grand Canyon is 7,200 feet. At the Colorado River, it's 2,000 feet. We live at 2,000 feet, just 1,800 foot elevation. When you are having to exert yourself at 7,000 feet climbing in switchbacks, virtually vertically slate switchbacks at 7,000 feet, you have to get conditioned before you can actually tackle that. So we actually go and hike in at about 4,000 to 5,000 to 6,000 foot elevation in Arches National Park, or our Canyonlands is our favorite. This year we hit the Capitol Reef. We have hiked it at Bryce or Zion. So those are national parks in the United States, and much as there seems to be some I won't say conflict, but some stress at the border. Once we get down there and we're hiking, no nationalities. I mean, it's just fun. But for me, I get in shape for spring because we will generally do essentially 20,000 steps a day on average. So it'll vary anywhere from 10 to 40. But when we come back, having hiked at that elevation, and just before the busy season, I feel very invigorated. And plus, my wife and I have had an opportunity to get together because she teaches piano and she gardens like crazy. So this is essentially the main event for us to kind of do stuff together without a lot of noise in the background.
I like that a lot. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And again, that's part of a 100-year plan. If I'm going to hit 100-year of it.
Oh, right.
That's right. Keep moving.
Yeah.
So John, you've got a lot of philosophies to live by, which I kind of like, and one of them is, and maybe this planning, this hike, this preseason training, is an extension of this whole farm brand that you've created. You've actually got a slogan which I wrote down. So family, stewardship, community, innovation. Maybe that's not a slogan, but that's on your farm logo. You've got a website, you've got a video. And what is the motivation behind doing all of that?
Well, again, if we're talking about several generations and how people perceive us, there's a danger and an advantage of having a website. People want to be a little bit judgmental, and maybe you don't want to come across as bragging, but yet we want to be transparent and what we value, and it helps us keep on track too. That we when you're making decisions, if you use these vision statements, it keeps you on track to make as a group and generations, because we'll be into the fourth generation here soon, because our plan is this is a legacy, that it's not a 50-year-old farm, it's a 2,000-year-old farm or more. So it helps everybody, I hope, to realize what my wife Linda's and my priorities are, and if we can carry that on, we feel that's the best we can do to live forever. So we're a little bit selfish, but it keeps us on track as a group.
Right. So it's for you internal as much, maybe even more so than any sort of external reach that a website might offer. It's just to keep everyone on the farm grounded. This is our philosophy. This is our approach. So two kind of quick things kind of stemming from that. I keep thinking back to your Monday morning 3-hour management meeting, and I can just see people saying, I don't have time for that. But in some ways, maybe that 3 focused hours just sets up for better profitability and productivity for all the rest of the hours spent in the week. Would you agree, or what? Or having done it, do you think, well, maybe it isn't the best use of our time?
I think it's critical to, again, when you're dealing with so many variables, and so you can think, I would say either outside the box, or you'll get consumed and get a tunnel vision. You get to sort things out as a plan, as opposed to a reaction. You're proactive instead of reactive. And I think I believe in agriculture we can get blindsided so many ways. So it allows for, I'll have to say, for good mental health as part of that. I mean, I don't want to say that lightly or a cop-out either, but I really think that it helps us, again, excuse the pun, be grounded in many ways. You have to, again, short-term pain, because sitting at those meetings, I'm thinking we could be out there doing something else. But I think we do better outside what we do when we're not there. And so I don't think it's a handicap. I think it's an advantage long term, and especially when you've got a group of people who have different talents, and you want to make sure all their talents and their efforts are appreciated.
So the last thing I have is just if you don't mind, Tobin, just so what is your message to your grandkids, and then that next 2 generations removed, when it comes to agriculture and your philosophy, your motivation? What message do you like to get across to them?
I guess the first is have fun. If you're not having fun, and have passion, right? So right now, I would say for our operation, but everyone, look for the opportunities in the challenges. There are always opportunities. I think there's books being written, that there's actually more opportunity when there are challenges than when they're not. It's much like marketing grain. When that's volatile, even though it may hit a low that you don't like, there's opportunity to take advantage of that. So that would, I think, in agriculture, that's what we have to look for. The glass is half full, not half empty. I think you have to have that mindset and not just say, well, we think of the future. No, it's even more. It's day to day. It's hour to hour. It's people to people. Look for the fun in every moment, because the journey should be enjoyable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I think both Jay and I could discuss. It's really fascinating, the kind of the structures and all the kind of workflows and stuff you have on your farm and how you've been able to implement them. And I think our listeners will be interested in that. I know I am as a farmer. We're always looking for kind of more efficient ways of doing things and how to better plan and how to better kind of navigate all this wildness of farming. So definitely appreciated your insights today.
I just go, if I could just have a second. So if you look at the plant, so we essentially grow a variety of crops. And people say, well, at times it's grown as many as 13 different crops. And rotation is critical in our thinking for soil health. That's something that's, I think, I won't say forgotten, but people feel it's an inconvenience. But we find it works for management. We start harvesting earlier and we harvest later. That's not always a good thing from our spouse's point of view, but we utilize our people, our equipment more efficiently. I really believe the agronomy of that is right, because you're not always spraying at the same time. You're not always harvesting at the same time. It throws the parasites or the weeds or whatever off balance. If we change the routine, we keep them confused. So that's part of it. But so that's a management challenge, but it's a management opportunity, and that's one reason it requires a lot of planning as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that.
Well, thanks, John. It's great talking to you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, and anytime.
Well, so that was interesting.
I learned a lot about, how to organize a business, and I think there's some messages there that would be applicable everywhere, including that 3-hour Monday morning planning meeting.
So when I had my grain news column, I once had a column about how my wife Jamie and I would meet. I think it was like every Saturday morning, and we would discuss the farm. We would talk about upcoming expenses, and that was primarily what it was. Those are always the big shocks of farming. Those numbers are always so high, but we found incredible value in just, even though some of these conversations were really stressful, but just talking about them, just kind of like, so that we're aware and that nobody is there's nothing kind of being ignored.
And I think that mental health, because John mentioned mental health, and you mentioned it too.
100%.
Where you just airing of grievances or opportunities.
It's like the Festivus for farming. That's right.
But at least if you get that out there, you get it off your chest. I mean, it might not necessarily change the situation, but it might ease the stress a little bit?
Yeah, it did. And so I wrote about it, right? I turned that into 600 to 800 words. And actually for on that column in particular, a lot of larger farms in Manitoba contacted me and asked me about that meeting, because they were, a lot of them even had employees, or they have more people operating on the farm than I do. And they were really curious about it and how that works, and what the structure was like, because they want to do something similar, because they, I guess, probably a lot of farms even to this day have, there's an opportunity for things to get ignored and build over time. And so they want the idea of imposing structures in a way that helps kind of alleviate that or mitigate that, is very attractive to people.
Imposing structure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds heavy, but it's also probably very effective.
Yeah, and I mean the trick is to just keep that going, right? I mean, Jamie, we haven't been as committed to that as we should be, but there is value. There's value in just returning to it, because even though it's uncomfortable at times, or even like my dad and I, setting up a structure there where maybe it is Monday mornings, we get together and we have a 1 hour, we drink tea and talk about the farm. I think that would be quite valuable. And what I also like about it is that he is to have an agenda, because they have an agenda and they treat it like a formal meeting, which I think, even if it's just my dad and I, or any other farm listening, if it's just a two or three, maybe 4 people, and you might think, an agenda, that's overkill. But I think that's really important.
I just keep thinking of Flight of the Conchords when they had their band meetings. And the 3 of them
were Rice Darby, or
the 3 of them are sitting around this little table, and then he actually does a roll call. Britt, present. Yeah. Eugene, Jermaine. Yeah. Mary, present. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, we're laughing, but it is pretty important. Okay, so one
Also
last thing, and then we can sign
show.
off. So do you invite your siblings and your nieces and nephews to family meetings on a regular basis?
Like how about never?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think my family, I haven't been to a farm planning meeting ever. But I've got 2 sons, and one of them probably would have been a great farmer. And I just thought, wow, that is so interesting that you keep that greater family involved, knowing that maybe there's someone out there who could be the perfect next generation farm leader.
Yeah. No, that is very, great conversation.
Once again, thank you to our episode sponsor, Sask Oilseeds, who want you to attend the Sask Crop Commission's field tour on June 25th at Davidson, Saskatchewan. The tour will highlight 2025 on-farm research trial protocols. Farmers and agronomists who want to attend can visit saskcanola.com to register.
This has been The Extensionists. I'm Jay Wetter.
And I'm Tobin Dick.
Till next time. This has been a Burr Forest Group production. We also want to thank the people you don't see.
We're here, we're chatting away with our guests, but there's tons of people who work behind the scenes to make this podcast happen.
Ryan Sanchi is our director.
Ashley Robinson is the coordinator.
And Abby Wall is our producer and editor.